welcome to our Phonics First and Structures program overview. My name is Kelly Lewis, and I am a lead instruction specialist and master instructor for Brainspring, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to share with you the wonderful things that our programs offer for your students. Well, let's start with a background of our company. Brainspring was founded in 1991, and our Educator Academy provides a variety of professional development options, including full courses and shorter workshops. We work with educators to help them achieve certification in our programs using an IMSLC accredited process, and our instructors engage in in-class coaching with educators who've been trained in our program. We do this all with the goal of improving literacy rates. We take pride in our accreditations from the International Dyslexia Association and the International Multisensory Structured Language Education Council. To reach as many educators and their students as we can, our programs are available in multiple formats. Phonics First is available in an in-person, live stream, self-paced, or even a hybrid format, and our Structures program is available in the same 4 formats. Regardless of which program or format that you might choose, these courses are approved as the first step in the process for earning certification through our coursework and practicum. Let's take a look at a comparison between our Level 1 courses. These courses are equivalent because they're both Level 1 courses, but there's some differences in the content and the grades that are targeted. So let's dive a little deeper. For Phonics First, aside from alphabet awareness, phonological awareness is included. There's 4 layers of phonetic concepts to develop reading and writing to the level of automaticity. A 3-part drill is a key component, allowing students to review all skills systematically. And the learning modes are multisensory and include tactile and kinesthetic spelling techniques. Phonics First addresses phonetic words and non-phonetic words, or irregular words, and facilitates orthographic mapping. Syllabication is included, and that is a precise strategy for students to make reading multisyllabic words quick and easy. The program teaches spelling rules, demystifying these skills for students. And oral reading, that's a lesson component that teaches students to apply their skills in context of connected text and build fluency, which is the key to reading success and necessary for comprehension. Like Phonics First, Structures addresses phonological awareness and the phonetic concepts that students at this stage are often assumed to know, but many times need support with. Morphology is a key component in Structures and is enormously beneficial in preparing students to read and comprehend the text levels that they work with in higher grades. This program utilizes multisensory learning techniques and also addresses irregular words in our language so that students can master spelling these words with ease. Syllabication is taught in Structures so that students learn to effortlessly read multisyllabic words by learning 8 syllable types and 3 division patterns. Structures include spelling rules, and this program is great for vocabulary development, which is crucial, and there's a strong focus on fluency building. We have partnered with multiple universities so that teachers engaged in our courses have the opportunity to earn 2 graduate credits while they learn our programs. That is a separate fee, but the cost is very reasonable. Educators who complete our course earn certificates of completion, as you can see here. And we're proud to offer digital resources for teachers with the Brainspring Digital Library. The library allows teachers to access the most up-to-date content in a format that is easily managed, portable, and printable. Our digital resources have many of the same features as print books. Teachers can take notes, highlight, add sticky notes, and even use bookmarks. We give teachers more tools for their toolbox. So as I mentioned, the interactive library is where teachers can access all of the lesson content, the workbook pages, and the assessments. And then our members area has hundreds of activities and supporting resources for all areas of the lesson plan. Teachers implementing our programs use this resource often for things such as printable games, implementation guidance, read word materials, just to name a few. So what are the options for implementation? These programs are so flexible. We'll start with Phonics First, and Structures will be shown in a later slide. But these programs satisfy all 3 tiers. So here we're looking at Tier 1, and there's 2 options for implementing in Tier 1. Whole class instruction generally is recommended at 30 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week. And the option for using the programs in a small group setting We usually recommend about 15 minutes for supporting the weekly skill and 20 or more minutes for those students who need increased intensity. Looking at Tier 2, we want to use this program for students who fall behind in decoding and encoding, and we want to do this in small groups that are 6 or less, and those students are grouped by their skill needs. This is usually recommended at about 30 minutes, 3 days per week as a minimum. And then in Tier 3, we're talking about students who've been identified with dyslexia or a learning difference, and their needs are not being met through Tier 2 intervention. So for those students in K-5, we recommend 120 minutes per week, and that can be done 30 minutes 4 times a week or 40 minutes 3 times a week. In grades 6 through 12, we recommend 150 to 160 minutes per week, and these group sizes are smaller, up to 4 students, and again, grouped according to their skill needs. Our programs align with the science of reading, so rest assured that this all-important research is addressed in both Phonics First and Structures. This research tells us that to effectively teach reading, language comprehension skills and word recognition skills are both essential. It's that latter half that Brainspring programs so thoroughly address. Let's take a look at the principles of instruction that the National Reading Panel determined are required for effective literacy education. These are the first 3. The first is phonics-based, meaning students need to experience the alphabetic principle of our language. And lessons should be structured and systematic so that students are using effective strategies that are common to all lessons. And we want to make sure skills aren't assumed, so we're using direct and explicit instruction. And these 3 that we've just discussed, those are recommended by the National Reading Panel for all readers. And the next 3 principles tell us that programs should engage as many senses as possible, building and strengthening pathways in the brain, and students should learn skills in sequence, and the program needs to be cumulative, building over time. And those last 3 are recommended by the National Reading Panel for any struggling readers. Now, Phonics First and Structures include all 6 of these principles. These programs are wonderful for all students in all tiers. Now, educators who take our course learn about important research that drives the components and strategies, and our instructors provide lots of strategy and lesson demonstration. Regardless of the course format, participants engage in hands-on practice with the lesson materials using the same multisensory strategies that their students will use. Let's take a look at the lesson components that are included in Phonics First and Structures. This is just an overview, but before we discuss each specific component, I'll just point out that these components can be used flexibly according to the schedule that the district or the teacher is using for phonics instruction. A full lesson contains all of these components, but they can be scheduled over multiple days depending on group size and student needs. So the 5-part lesson plan starts off with a phonological awareness warm-up, and then we do a 3-part drill to review all of the skills that have been previously taught. And our multisensory introduction is where we introduce new skills to students. Syllabication is a process for reading multisyllabic words, so I'll get into that soon. And our red word section is where we introduce and review irregular words from our language. And oral reading is where we bring it all together. So a full lesson contains all of these components, but they can be scheduled over multiple days depending on group size and student needs. And this is a tool that we provide to both administrators and teachers, and it's a great way to check for fidelity. The one you see here is for Phonics First, and there's one available for Structures as well. So each lesson begins with a short but essential phonological awareness warm-up, and our courses stress the importance of phonological awareness to literacy success. You can see here that students move through key stages, with the advanced stages being phonemic awareness. The development of these skills ensures success with phonics, which is the connection of the sounds and symbols in our language. In fact, these connections must be thoroughly developed to achieve success with reading. Unfortunately, students in all grade levels can be found to be lacking phonological awareness. We know students make the strongest connections when they hear the sounds and patterns before the symbol is even introduced. And phonological awareness skills strongly predict a student's success with literacy. The stronger a student's phonological awareness, the faster they can develop reading, writing, and spelling mastery. So next we have the 3-part drill, and this provides systematic review. It includes a visual drill, an auditory drill, and a blending drill. In the visual drill, the student sees a card and says the sound or the morpheme, and this process supports reading by building automaticity and fluency as students convert the symbol to the sound. The second part of the drill is the auditory drill, and this is where students write what they hear. So if they hear B, they say and write B and repeat the sound. In structures, if they hear a morpheme, such as tele, they say and write T-E-L-E, tele. This means students are converting sounds into symbols, which supports automatic and fluent spelling. The blending drill asks students to blend sounds, or in structures, they blend morphemes together, and this builds automaticity and fluency at the syllable level. Now, we stress automaticity here because when students are truly automatic with these skills, their brain is freed up for comprehension, and they can be proficient with reading and writing. Next, we have a skill intensive, and this is used to address confusions or weaknesses with specific skills. This really allows teachers to target the needs of students that they observe during their lessons and in student work. This might look like you see in the photo, where students have to use auditory discrimination to choose which short vowel sound they hear. So you can see them holding up their sticks to show that they hear the short vowel sound A. Or it could be an intensive activity that has students writing words on a T-chart as they decide whether the word should be spelled with a CH or a TCH. So the possibilities are endless for using this lesson component to really target specific skills that students need to work on. Next, we have a multisensory introduction, and that has 2 parts. So the first part of introducing something new to students is called the multisensory activity. Why is a multisensory introduction the way to introduce new skills? Well, it's very hands-on, so students gain a deeper understanding. It includes kinesthetic movement at the same time as seeing and hearing information, and that leaves the most lasting mark in their memory. Motor or muscle memory is developed, increasing retention, and students are more likely to remember information after the learning session. So this is really what sets this teaching method apart from other programs, and it ensures effectiveness. Introducing a new skill to students, such as the short vowel sound ah, involves a number of important steps. This skill is an example of a sound with a keyword, as you can see by the octopus in the corner of the card. Keywords determine the multisensory activity that is used as an introduction, and they serve as an anchor for students. Students always practice new skills in our Magic Sand, which is a really powerful multisensory tool. In structures, students are introduced not only to the phonemes and graphemes in our language, but also to Greek and Latin roots. Keywords are also a part of the structures lessons, and the multisensory introduction isn't complete without the second part, dictation. Dictation is a significant piece. It's where teachers have students immediately apply what they've just learned in the multisensory activity. And during dictation, teachers give students a curated list of words to spell, to put their new learning into practice. And students are taught a multisensory segmenting strategy for spelling. Students also read the list of words to develop fluency with the new skill. In addition to spelling words, teachers dictate sentences for the students to write, which are controlled to contain only the concepts that have been explicitly taught, and students then read those sentences. Syllabication begins in Layer 2 of Phonics First, or Block 1 of Structures, and it is a really powerful tool for decoding multisyllabic words. Syllabication gives students a solid strategy to quickly attack unfamiliar words with multiple syllables. This rapidly improves their accuracy, leading to improved comprehension. The program teaches 8 different syllable types, and students learn to quickly identify these in words they read, helping them to know how to pronounce the vowel in each syllable. Red words, this is where we teach and systematically review the irregular words in our language. About 85% of our language is rule-based, so teaching students the rules, which is what happens in the previous lesson components, massively impacts their reading and spelling. But that leaves about 15% of our language that doesn't follow the expected spelling patterns. So we need to teach these words in a different way, but it still needs to be multisensory. Teachers using Phonics First and Structures help their students analyze words to find the predictable and the irregular spellings. And one way we do that is through an orthographic mapping exercise. And then they lead students through prescribed multisensory steps to permanently learn the word for both reading and spelling. A 2-part review of the read words is built into the lesson to create long-term retention. And finally, oral reading, and this brings together all the other parts of the lesson, allowing for essential practice in context and the development of real fluency. As I mentioned, during the oral reading lesson component, students are able to practice their phonetic skills and their read word knowledge within connected text. The texts are carefully chosen to align with the skills taught in the lesson and to include review concepts. So that takes us to the end of our 5-part lesson plan. Let's move on and discuss assessing. With our Phonics First and Structures programs, teachers have multiple assessment options. The one you see here is our small group diagnostic assessment. This is a resource for intervention, remediation, or any small group instruction. The forms in this kit are easy to use and analyze to identify skill gaps of individual students in both reading and spelling. For the general education classroom, we have something different. It's the Classroom Phonics Assessment, and that aligns with the lessons in our general education scope and sequence. This is a progress monitoring option for whole class instruction. And here you see an example of a spelling schedule, which has students completing a short spelling assessment every 2 weeks. If we zero in on week 18, for example, you can see what that spelling assessment includes. And the data from this is used to determine which students may need additional support and the effectiveness of instruction. Progress monitoring for reading is on a different schedule. That occurs every 5 weeks. So let's take a closer peek at an example of the reading assessment. Here's week 16 from the Year 2 scope and sequence. Now, since this assessment needs to be completed with individual students, teachers use a scoring form to record and analyze the data. This makes for a very quick process and allows teachers to keep an eye on each student's success and needs for support on a regular basis. We discussed implementation options briefly in an earlier slide, but now that you have a better idea of the lesson components, we can think about it in some greater detail. Brainspring provides teachers with schedule samples, and these are meant to be examples of how a schedule might look in various instructional settings. For Phonics First, we're looking at a sample of a schedule in a general education classroom. This example is based on a half hour of instruction, 5 days per week. And for this group of students, phonological awareness is addressed briefly each day. And the 3-part drill you can see is implemented almost every day, and that really ensures adequate review. 1 new skill is taught on Monday, and then practice through word and sentence dictation on 4 days of the week. You can see assessment is built in on Friday. And then read words, syllabication, and oral reading are interspersed throughout the week. You'll notice some time on Friday that's set aside for whichever area the teacher feels is most needed. And then along the bottom, there's information about using small group instruction for students who need extra support. Similarly, we have a sample schedule for how Phonics First might be implemented in a kindergarten classroom. Our kindergarten lesson plan has time built in for letter formation and additional vowel intensive practice. And we also have separate recommendations and sample schedules for intervention and remediation scenarios. The 2 examples here show Tier 2 and Tier 3 options that total either 150 minutes per week or 90 minutes per week. Again, these are just guidelines. They can be adjusted according to the needs and growth of the students, as well as the schedule of the interventionist or the special education teacher. In terms of scope and sequence, we have a 32-week schedule for whole group instruction. And this scope and sequence covers a broad range of skills designed to meet grade level requirements and assumes that small group instruction is utilized for students who show that need for additional support. Skill instruction spirals from year to year so that skills are revisited and taught to mastery. For intervention and remediation groups, the scope and sequence is not recommended. Instead, students should be assessed and grouped using our small group diagnostic assessment that I mentioned earlier. And the sequence of lessons should follow the curriculum guide, which allows struggling students to master the foundational skills. The pace used in this setting is determined by the needs of the students. And with our most struggling students, we always recommend going as fast as you can, but as slow as you need to. Next, we're going to look at year 1 of the classroom scope and sequence, which doesn't necessarily mean grade 1. Instead, these scope and sequences are set up for the first year of implementation, or year 1, or the second year of implementation, or year 2, and a separate scope and sequence is available for kindergarten. And when looking at the scope and sequence, I want you to know that these are developed based on grade level needs, and many schools use them as written, but you are able to move the lessons around to meet your state or district guidelines or to connect with an ELA program that you're using. Next, the Phonics First small group scope and sequence shows the sequence of skills for intervention and remediation groups. And this comes directly from our curriculum guide. It allows for instruction that fills the learning gaps for our struggling students who are missing the foundational knowledge that's needed for success with literacy. It's very common for students who are struggling to be lacking in mastery of the short vowels and the digraphs, so teachers often utilize the 6+ lessons for students in Layer 1. And then they can progress them to the Layer 2 skills fairly quickly, and they have a solid base in place to work with the more advanced syllables in text and writing. And here we see the lesson sequence for Volume 2 for students in Layers 3 and 4. And now we can take a look at the Structures program, which has very similar implementation schedules. The scheduling options for Structures differentiate between skill instruction and morpheme instruction, however. So this slide shows a 5-day scheduling sample, and here we see a 3-day scheduling option. Implementation of the Structures program for students with dyslexia who need support beyond Tier 2 instruction is recommended for a minimum of 30 minutes per session and at least 3 days per week. And group size is an important factor here. These groups should have 6 or fewer students who all have similar skill needs. Some students have significant skill gaps, as we know, and sometimes they've been identified as having dyslexia or a learning difference. These are the students who need more intensive support, so we recommend increasing the instruction time to 150 to 160 minutes per week and lowering the group size to 4 students or less. As you know, Structures has phonics skill instruction as well as morpheme instruction, and like Phonics First, Structures has a prescribed scope and sequence for the general education setting. If your school would like to use morpheme instruction for grades 4 and 5, this scope and sequence is designed for the Tier 1 general education classroom. And for small group instruction, teachers should follow the sequence of the curriculum guide for Structures. Structures has 5 blocks of lessons. Teachers should teach all of the morpheme lessons, but need to teach only the phonics skills lessons that students show a need for based on the diagnostic assessment results. So let's talk about planning for observations. Administrators often ask how they can support students and teachers to ensure the maximum effectiveness of Phonics First and Structures within their district or building. When observing lessons, we recommend that administrators and teachers review that lesson components checklist together prior to the observation to establish what will be included in the lesson that's observed. During the observation, the checklist can be used to determine the level of fidelity, and then after the observation, the discussion and feedback for the lesson can be structured around that checklist, facilitating a plan for supporting implementation. As you consider adopting Phonics First or Structures, we have some questions that you'll want to explore to guide you towards success. To help you identify your vision for implementation, you'll want to think about: how is Phonics First or Structures intended to be used? Are you thinking it will be a whole class program, small groups? And will Phonics First or Structures be integrated into an existing curriculum, or will it be used as the core phonics word study program? Where does Phonics First or Structures fit into your school's daily schedule? And how many hours per week will you devote to Phonics First or Structures? We recommend about 30 minutes, 5 times per week. So how does that fit for your situation? Will you be able to implement the programs to ensure fidelity? And can teachers rely on administration to provide additional materials if necessary? So often teachers finish a course and they learn the program, and then they find that depending on how many groups they're working with, they may need additional card packs or they need to replenish things from year to year. We have so many resources available in the members area that can be printed off, so some schools choose to do that for their teachers. And there's some items also that can be purchased on our Brainspring store that support implementation. And does the Phonics First or Structures scope and sequence support your local and state requirements? Is there a team that you can count on that can devote time to adjusting the scope and sequence to comply with that? And do teachers understand how the school expects them to assess these programs? So, how can you communicate to teachers those expectations? I want to thank you for your shared interest in improving literacy rates for your students. If you have more questions or you're ready to discuss next steps, please reach out to our partnerships team at partnerships@brainspring.com.